In the heart of Europe, a quiet but profound transformation is underway, one that could reshape the continent's political landscape for years to come. Hungary, a nation long seen as a bridge between East and West, is now making a dramatic pivot away from its traditional Western allies, raising eyebrows across the European Union. Under the leadership of Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, the Hungarian government is forging deep and strategic partnerships with China and the BRICS bloc. This bold move directly challenges the post-Cold War order that has defined Europe for decades, signaling a new era of geopolitical competition. Such a shift is testing the European Union's unity like never before, exposing divisions and signaling a potential crack in the once solid transatlantic alliance with the United States. By turning eastward, Hungary is betting its future on a new world order, one where prosperity and sovereignty are sought in Beijing and Moscow, rather than in Brussels or Washington. This is a high-stakes gamble that could redefine Hungary's place in the world. In recent months, the country has hosted a flurry of high-level meetings and signed major investment deals. Chinese infrastructure projects are springing up across Hungary, while ties with Russia remain strong. Even as much of Europe distances itself from Moscow, this is no accident. Orbán's strategy is deliberate. He is positioning himself as a maverick, a leader willing to defy the mainstream and defend a vision of Europe that is more independent, more nationalistic, and less beholden to Western influence. Tonight, we'll delve into the history that shaped Hungary's identity, examine the deals that are driving this realignment, and consider the far-reaching consequences for both Hungary and the wider world. Is Hungary truly on a path to greater sovereignty and self-determination, or is it simply trading one form of dependency for another, swapping Brussels for Beijing? The journey to uncover the truth behind Hungary's bold new direction begins now. Join us as we explore the crossroads of history, politics, and power in modern Europe. Hungary's 2004 entry into the EU was widely celebrated as a historic turning point, marking the country's definitive break from its Soviet-dominated past. For many Hungarians, joining the European Union symbolized a return to the heart of Europe, promising prosperity, stability, and a new era of opportunity. In the years that followed, Hungary eagerly embraced market reforms and democratic institutions, reaping the benefits of EU membership. Billions in EU funds flowed into the country, modernizing infrastructure, supporting farmers, and opening up new markets for Hungarian businesses. The promise of shared European values and economic growth seemed within reach. However, the political landscape shifted dramatically in 2010 with the rise of Viktor Orbán and his Fidesz party. Their landslide victory marked the beginning of a new era, one that would challenge Hungary's relationship with the EU. Orbán's vision of an illiberal democracy put national sovereignty and traditional values above the liberal norms championed by Brussels. This approach quickly brought Hungary into conflict with the EU, as the government tightened its grip on the media, judiciary, and civil society. Disputes erupted over issues like media freedom, judicial independence, and migration policy. The EU responded with Article 7 proceedings, a rare and serious step, while Hungary increasingly used its veto power to block EU initiatives, deepening the rift. As relations with Brussels soured, Hungary began to look eastward. This estrangement opened the door for non-Western powers, such as Russia and China, to offer economic partnerships and political support, often without the democratic conditions demanded by the EU. The Hungarian government insists that its so-called Eastern turn is a pragmatic strategy to diversify alliances and boost the economy, not a rejection of Europe. Yet critics argue that Budapest is seeking out less critical partners to avoid scrutiny over its domestic policies. With new agreements and high-profile summits, Hungary's foreign policy began to shift boldly, signaling a willingness to challenge EU consensus and forge its own path on the world stage. The government maintains that the EU is too rigid and often disregards Hungary's unique history and national identity, fueling a sense of grievance and defiance among its supporters. Meanwhile, critics warn that Hungary's search for new allies risks undermining democratic standards and could isolate the country within Europe as it seeks legitimacy and support from powers unconcerned with democracy or human rights. Hungary's pivot to China is now a reality, marked by President Xi Jinping's 2024 visit and the elevation of ties to a comprehensive strategic partnership. Nearly 20 agreements were signed, including the flagship Belgrade-Budapest Railway, financed by Chinese loans. Critics warn the project increases debt and gives China a foothold in the EU, while the government touts it as vital infrastructure. Chinese investment is also transforming Hungary's manufacturing sector, with BYD and Cattel building major factories. Orban hails these deals as putting Hungary at the forefront of the green transition. Foreign Minister Szijjártó openly opposes the EU's de-risking from China, calling cooperation a huge opportunity. Hungary is not just accepting Chinese investment, it's championing a deeper, integrated relationship. This places Budapest in direct opposition to Brussels' consensus. Hungary is positioning itself as China's most reliable partner inside the EU. Hungary's eastern opening extends beyond China to the wider BRICS bloc. In 2025, Hungary sought to join the BRICS New Development Bank, signaling a desire for alternative financing free from EU conditions. This alarmed Brussels, as Hungary would be the first EU state to join a BRICS financial institution. Orban regularly attends BRICS forums, echoing calls for a multipolar world and less reliance on the US dollar. He frames Hungary as a bridge between East and West, aligning with Moscow and Beijing's narratives. This strategy gives Hungary leverage in disputes with the EU, sending a message that it has other powerful friends. It's a high-stakes negotiation tactic, using global rivalry to advance national interests. Whether this approach brings influence or isolation remains to be seen. Hungary's BRICS gambit is a calculated move in a shifting world order. The outcome will shape Hungary's place in Europe and beyond. Hungary's pivot brings both economic promise and risk. Chinese investment in EVs and batteries could create thousands of jobs and drive growth, especially as EU funds remain frozen. But heavy reliance on China creates new dependencies and exposes Hungary to geopolitical risks and potential EU backlash. Projects like the Belgrade-Budapest Railway add to national debt, and some investments may benefit foreign workers more than locals. The EU remains Hungary's main trading partner, and diverging from EU policy risks further sanctions or loss of market access. Hungary is trying to balance Eastern investment with Western market access, a delicate act with high stakes. The government hopes to benefit from both worlds, but economists debate if this model is sustainable. The economic crossroads Hungary faces will define its future prosperity. Hungary's eastern pivot is shaking the EU's foundations, challenging its unity and shared values. By partnering with China and BRICS, Hungary undermines the EU's common foreign policy and weakens its global stance. This has led to frustration among EU leaders and calls to reform decision-making rules. The conflict over rule of law and withheld EU funds has fueled anti-EU sentiment in Hungary and inspired other populist movements. The EU faces an existential dilemma: act too softly and risk losing credibility, act too harshly and risk a Hungarian exit. Hungary's model could embolden others to pick and choose EU rules. The crisis demands a balance of principle and dialogue. The outcome will define the EU's future cohesion. Hungary's actions are a test for the European project. The stakes for unity and values have never been higher. Hungary's foreign policy shift is dividing its society and shaping national identity. The government's narrative of sovereignty and Eastern partnership resonates with many, especially in rural areas. But urban, younger, pro-European Hungarians see the pivot as a betrayal of democratic values and EU promises. Protests and debates reflect this deep divide, amplified by contrasting media coverage. In cities like Debrecen, new investments bring both jobs and concerns over environmental impact and social integration. Tensions over foreign workers and local benefits mirror the national debate. The struggle is a battle for Hungary's sole illiberal sovereignty or Western democracy. The government's media control shapes opinion, but pro-EU voices remain strong. The outcome of this internal conflict will determine Hungary's long-term direction. The world is watching Hungary's realignment with a mix of alarm, curiosity, and fascination. As Hungary charts a new course on the global stage, its actions are sparking intense debate and speculation in capitals around the world. In Washington, policymakers view Hungary's growing ties with China and Russia as a direct challenge to transatlantic unity and Western cohesion. American officials worry that Budapest's pivot could undermine NATO's collective strength and complicate efforts to present a united front against authoritarian powers. Meanwhile, EU leaders are sounding the alarm, warning that Hungary's access to vital European funds is contingent on upholding democratic norms and the rule of law. Yet, not all in Central Europe agree. Some neighboring states quietly share Hungary's skepticism of Brussels and see its defiance as a sign of growing regional assertiveness. In contrast, Beijing celebrates Hungary as a strategic bridge into the European Union. opening doors for Chinese investment and influence. Moscow, too, values Hungary's willingness to dissent within both NATO and the EU, seeing it as a rare ally in a bloc often united against Russian interests. Political analysts and experts remain deeply divided. Some warn that Prime Minister Orban is risking Hungary's isolation and overestimating his leverage with global powers. Others argue he is a pragmatic leader, skillfully adapting to a rapidly shifting world order and seizing opportunities where others see only risk. For some, Hungary stands as a cautionary tale about the dangers of drifting from European unity. For others, it is a forerunner, signaling the emergence of a more fragmented, multipolar Europe where national interests increasingly trump collective ideals. The international response has been swift and intense, underscoring the unprecedented nature of Hungary's political gamble and the uncertainty it brings to the continent. The stakes are high, not just for Hungary, but for the future of alliances, the stability of the European Union, and the balance of power across the globe. Hungary's bold choices are now shaping debates and influencing policy discussions far beyond its own borders, forcing other nations to reconsider their own positions. As the world watches closely, the question remains, will Hungary's gamble pay off, or will it serve as a warning for others contemplating a similar path? Hungary stands at a crossroads, steering away from the Western alliance toward a new, multipolar world. Orban's government bets on prosperity and sovereignty through Eastern partnerships, challenging the EU's foundations. The rewards are clear investment, jobs, and national pride. But the risks, economic dependency, political isolation, and democratic erosion are just as real. Hungary is testing whether a member can play by different rules and still belong to the club. The answers will shape Europe's future. As Hungary writes this new chapter, the world must reflect on its own alliances and values. Will the future be one of competing blocs, or can a united community of democracies endure? Hungary's story is still being written, and its outcome matters to us all.